All right. So why are we spending so much time on data cleanup? Because in real life, we get the data and we want to analyze it, of course. But all of us spend a lot of time in the cleanup part, and that gives us less time on the analytical part. Now, how do we do it traditionally? Usually, we will do this by various methods. One would be manual, other would be formulas, and third would be macros, or a permutation combination of all these three methods. I'm sure all of you do this anyway, but what has happened is Power Query has made all our efforts in data cleanup completely obsolete. So I strongly suggest whatever you may be doing to do data cleanup, it may be working, no problem, but still look at Power Query afresh. So any data cleanup requirement, small or large, revisit that process and recast it using Power Query. Forget about what you were doing earlier, and that will give you significant benefits. As we go along, you will get a lot of ideas. Go and try them out later. When I'm showing something, don't try to do it right there because you'll miss the next topic. So where is this Power Query? Fortunately for us, this Power Query as a tool is available in Excel as well as in Power BI. So whether you learn it in Power BI or Excel, you already know the other part. So that's a good thing. In Excel, where is it? Earlier we had get external data, which has been there for decades. Now it is replaced with get and transform. This will be newer versions of Excel. I will not tell you the version number because there are so many version numbers and people get confused. If you go to your Excel data tab and you see get and transform, that means you have that. If you see get external data, that means you have older version of Excel. Sometimes you see get external data and get and transform. So just check the second one as well. In case you don't have it, you can install it as an add-in, Power Query add-in. If you install it as an add-in, then it will be a separate tab. It will not go under data because we added it on top of Excel. Now the Power Query tab has many menu options like this. But if you already have the new version of Excel, you don't need this Power Query tab. All these menus have been crunched into this area. So practically menus are same. It's just the layout and position which is different. Now in Power BI, where is it? So this is Power BI. This is Power BI. And in Power BI, where do we have this? Let me show you. In Power BI again, we have get data and we have transform data as a separate button, but basically the same thing. Okay, so just a quick understanding of what is the commonality or differences between how data is handled in Excel and how it is done in Power BI. As I showed you, get and transform is the menu in Excel. Get data and transform data is in Power BI. The difference comes where to store the data. In Excel, we have two choices. One is Excel sheet and the other is data model. In Power BI works independent of Excel. So there is no Excel sheet there. So there is only data tab. Let me show you both because many people who are using Excel don't understand what is that data model. So when we import data from data, get data, whatever source, it will ask you, do you want to store it in an Excel sheet or data model? Where is data model? For that you require Power Pivot tab. And this thing here is called the data model. Power Pivot Manage. If you see, that is the data model really. So when you click on it, what happens is it opens a separate window that's called the Power Pivot for Excel window. And this is your data model. Generally, if you have never used it, if this part will be empty, but Power Query can insert data directly in the data model instead of putting it in the sheet. What is the benefit of putting data in the data model instead of the sheet? Data model has no upper limit. Excel sheet has an upper limit of 1 million rows. Data model, no limit. Practical limit is the hardware capability, but technically no limit. It gives you many other benefits, and this data model is same as what we get in Power BI. So where is Power BI data model? Let's see that as well. So when you go to Power BI, there are three things on the left side. Power BI has a main menu on top, File, Home, Insert, and on the left side there are three tabs. The first tab is Report, where we create the visualization. The second tab is the Data tab, and the third tab is Relationships tab. So this is the data model, second tab. So in Power BI it will go in this tab, and in Excel it will go to the other tab. Depending on what you chose, it will either come into the Excel sheet or it will go to the data model. All right, now what next? In Excel, you can shape data. What is shaping data? We will see later, but both are possible in data model. In Excel, the analytical engine is pivot table, pivot charts, and manual calculations, whatever you want to do. In Power BI is the reports tab, which I just showed you. How do you share reports in Excel? Send the file, send the link by putting it on OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, or copy paste into PPT. In Power BI, yes, you can save the file as PBX file and send it to each other like Excel, or put it on OneDrive, SharePoint, and send the link. But ideal method is you don't want the data to be shown to other people. So that's Power BI portal, publish it, and then you can also see it on mobile app, and yes, you can export it to PPT or PDF. And then we have online data import possible using data sets and data flow. We will see that towards the end. So now the topics we are going to cover are these. Some of them have already started, but let's go one by one. Now, what is the purpose of Power Query? It is to get the data and clean it so that it can be analyzed the way we want. And of course, do it as automatically as possible without wasting time every cycle, because cleanup is repetitive. Now, in order to understand what is clean data, we have to know exactly what clean data means. So this is the checklist for clean data. When you look at your data, look at every column which has come in and check all these 10 things. If all the 10 things are good, then no data cleanup is required. If any of them are not correct, for example, there are merged cells, or there are inconsistent data types, or there are unwanted sub or grand totals, then you have to repair that part. So this checklist tells you, is your data clean? Yes, no. If not, what is the unclean part? And then that guides you to exactly what to do to clean it. There are other things also, but let's go with this to start with. There are a few things which many of people don't understand. So some of them are obvious. Obviously, a column has to have a heading. It should have consistent data type. It should not have duplicate headings for obvious reasons. No merged cells. Merged cells, you do whatever you want in output, not in input. Input data is raw data. You're not supposed to look at it. You're supposed to use it to create a report which is worth looking at. So all this is for raw data. So a couple of things which are not so obvious, I will show you. One of the things which is not obvious is formatting. Very often we put formatting instead of data. That's bad. That is not good. Why? Because even if you remember what yellow means and red means, others don't know it, and you are also going to forget it after some time. And even if you remember it, you can't sort, filter, or more importantly, get analytics on color or any other formatting. So you can't say give me total of yellow color. So bottom line, if you need to analyze something, it has to be a column. That's all there is to it. Then one type means, of course, every column should have one type of data, but that also can be misleading. For example, here this is amount, but suppose I put empty, that's okay because this is either 0 or I don't know. But here it is not okay because this empty is different meaning and this empty is different meaning. So is this. So gaps in these two columns need to be filled. Gaps in this column are okay because they have a business meaning. These things are not business meanings. That's just convenience. or maybe someone created an output, typically pivot table. In pivot table, you can always go and fill the gaps in one instant like this. You go to design, report layout, and say repeat all item labels. By default, it is like this. Repeat all item labels solves the problem. So if you are doing copy paste from pivot table, this is the way to fill gaps. The other things which are important is very important part. Data should always grow vertically like this. So if it's a muster, fine. On paper it was like this, but that doesn't mean we do it in Excel, even though it has a lot of columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, it goes on and on. That is what data grows horizontally. We don't want that. Data should grow vertically, which means there should be only 3 columns. How to do this we will see, but just understand what clean data means. So these are the 10 rules for clean data. There is an 11th rule. Assume you got all this done and your data is now clean. Very good. What is the 11th rule? 11th rule is if you have multiple pieces of good data which are related to each other, don't keep them separately. This is very important because very often we get data for reporting purposes periodically, monthly, quarterly, weekly. Every time we import the data, we clean it up, make a report, save it as a separate file. Then second month, repeat. Third month, repeat. So you have 12 files at the end of the year. Now, if you realize, yes, the months are different, but the data is in similar context. The data is same, just the change is month. So ideally, don't keep them in 12 sheets or 12 files. Keep them in one place. How do we make it in one place? So example, this data came from north. So I put it in north sheet, south sheet, west sheet, whatever. That's not a good idea because whatever you put in file name or sheet name cannot be analyzed. Whatever you put in a column can be analyzed. So yes, you do need to keep track of which data is north, which is south, which is west, because those 3 people sent it to you separately. Of course, you want to know which row is what, but this is not the way to do it. The individual pieces of data are clean as per our rules. So the combination should also be clean, not scattered. Why? Because if you keep it like this, consolidating it is going to be painful. So what do? Whatever you would have put otherwise in the sheet name or file name, put it as a column. That's all there is to it. Even if nobody is asking for a consolidated report, do it. Sooner or later, someone will ask. Even if they don't ask, good opportunity for you. You look at the combined data, find some trends which others who are only seeing it periodically in isolation are going to miss. And then you add value to your business. Okay, so that's about 11 rules. Now let's talk about where to get data from. There are lots of data sources. Now, number of data sources are different, whether it is Excel or Power BI. And there is a third one called Dataflows that currently supports around half of them, so 78. So what are these? 7 kinds of files can be imported. 11 types, or rather here 37 types of databases can be connected to. 7 Azure services can be connected from Excel, 17 from Power BI, and so on and so forth. So let's see where this menu is so that we get familiar with it. In Excel, where do we go? We go to a new file or same file, doesn't matter, but ideally a new file. I'll tell you why. Data, get data, from file, and then we have options. Like that we have from database, from Azure, and so on. So I've just counted these and given you these things. Of course, in Excel, there is a option called Power BI. So Power BI data can be directly consumed in Excel. That's the integration between the two. We will see what is the benefit of that a little later. So this is the story for Excel. In Power BI, what happens is this. In Power BI, you go to the Home tab and get data. Click on More so that you see all sources. Again, all is confusing because they are all mixed up. Go and look at all the options. Yes, I mean it. Go and look at all the options. Not now, later, category by category. And don't just read them cursorily. Think, do I or will I get data in this type? For example, many people miss this. PDF is a very important source for many people because they get PDF outputs from various places and they have to copy paste tabular data into Excel. Similarly, databases, they are not just Microsoft databases. There are many databases. There is a scroll bar. Scroll and at least read the name of each, because for all you know, some of these you already have in your enterprise. If you are not sure, show this to your IT team and say, do we have any of these? If yes, then it's a good news, because now Power BI can directly connect to those sources rather than exporting some random report or CSV and then importing into Excel. So it eliminates one step. IT may say, you can't be given data access. So prove to them that this is read only. And you can define the frequency with which you want to touch that data so that it doesn't affect the backend system's performance. This is Power Platform, Power BI datasets. We will see what those mean. Common data services basically means dataverse, a more evolved database, which is not just a database, it is a database, security engine, and business process engine all in one. Normally we have database separate and everything else is built on top of it. Dataverse is all of them built. So bottom line, if you have data in your applications, it is already being stored in some database, no problem. But if you have some data which you are randomly capturing in Excel, SharePoint, something like that, but it is business critical, try to move to Dataverse. It will give you a lot of benefits. We will do a separate session on that next time. But remember, Dataverse is like Data Boss. It's a boss of database in terms of functionality. Dataflows we'll see later. Azure has many services. Again, go and look at it. You'll be surprised. Many of these your IT may be using in the background. And online services, a long list, not just from Microsoft. You'll see Salesforce, Google, Adobe, all of them are here. If you are using LinkedIn, many people are using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is in beta, but you can start using it. So many of these connectors remain in beta for some time and then they get finalized. And then of course there's a very long list of other services. Other most common and most probably important is web. You can go to any web page and scrape data without having an RPA tool. OData feed sounds technical, but you'll be surprised many data sources, including your cloud applications like your finance, HR, marketing, may be giving you OData feeds. So things which you are exporting as a report and then export to Excel technically can come as OData feed, and that's clean data, minimal effort required to clean it up. And then there are many other things. And the worst possible scenario, a simple blank query also. For legacy databases which are old, like say FoxPro, Clipper kind of things, no problem. ODBC and OLEDB still work. I can't think of any database engine in the world which doesn't have one of these connectors. So even if your database is some arcane database, it can connect using one of these. So that's about data sources. Now, how do we connect to them? So remember, we are trying to bring in tables, and a collection of tables is called a database. So that's common across all sources. Now, there are two types of connections. We will not go into those right now, but just to make sure you understand, by default, whatever we do, we go to Power BI, we install Power BI desktop, and then import the data. Generally, when you are doing that, the data is getting physically imported. A copy of the data is getting physically imported into Power BI desktop. And that data stays with that. When you publish it, it goes to Power BI portal. So that is the local version. This is the most commonly used. But many data sources, especially database oriented sources, do give you direct query, which is a better option for large data handling. And it also is real time, near real time. So if you have IoT kind of thing, you should use this. If you have transactional data where real timeness is not required, data is small, use this. And some databases, of course, provide live connection. You can go and understand the differences between the two, but for our purpose, this doesn't matter right now. We are going to focus on local part. Most of the things do work in all of them, but there are some limitations about what you can do in cleanup if it is direct query or live. What does this primary difference mean? Primary difference means here the data is physically copied into your Power BI file. Here the data is not kept in Power BI. The data is requested from the underlying data source when you refresh the visual or dashboard. That's the difference. Data is here, data is not here. Where is this data then? Wherever it came from. It could be SAP, it could be Oracle, whatever, like that. Okay, so far so good. Now let's look at the process. We have seen data sources. We don't do anything else. You always use Power Query to connect to the data sources. Get the data, 1 piece, 2 pieces, 20 pieces, doesn't matter. Each piece coming from a different source, doesn't matter. And then we clean it up here. And once we are happy with it, we put it in the data model, or in case of Excel, the Excel sheet also. And then we do whatever we want to do for analytical purpose. Now, assuming we created the report in data Power BI, for example, I got the data here and then I created some visual here. And then what happens? Where is all this going? So I'm just creating a visual because I want something to be there. That's all. A simple pivot table like thing, but I'll convert it to a pie chart, for example. Now this visual, this thing is on local Power BI desktop. How do you do that? How do you download it? You go to powerbi.com, log in using a corporate ID. It does not require any money to be paid to Microsoft. Just log in to Power BI. Once you log into powerbi.com and log in, you will see download, and in download Power BI desktop. That is what I'm showing you right now. Once you download Power BI desktop, log in Power BI desktop as well, so that you can publish it. There is a sign in option at the bottom. Anyway, so now whatever I'm doing here, I went to get data, I imported the data, it has come into this data model. This is there physically in this file. Now I created a report out of it. It's a very simple report, but never mind. Now if I save this, what happens? It creates a file called PBIX file. So let me save it as, what is the file extension? PBIX file. This also will contain data. Means what? If it's very large data, this file becomes very large. Now, I can send this file to each other, but it will be size limitation first of all. And second thing is, the other person also needs to have Power BI desktop installed. I can do that for free, but then I am exposing my entire raw data to those people. If you only want them to see the dashboard, interact with it, but not touch the raw data or my formulas or my structure of the dashboard, then you have to publish it. When you publish it, what happens? When you publish it, it goes to Power BI portal, which is here. Now, when you go to Power BI portal, if you publish a report, two things will get uploaded. This is the icon for report and this is the icon for data set. So what happened here in this data set? Whatever was in Power BI desktop in the data tab, notice I have two tables here. Both these tables became a data set when they went to Power BI. So if I click on this data set, this has both the tables basically. Now this data set is being used to generate this report. Okay. But now that this data set is here, I can use this data set to create other reports as well. And very important, if I feel that all the effort which I have put in creating and cleaning up this data set is not just useful to me, but for my team also, I can actually go to settings and publish this data source, or as a, what we call it as endorsement. Means what? I am helping my colleagues say, I like this data set. I think it will be useful to you. Why don't you also use it? And say promote it. So when people go to data sets, they can see the data set and use it, so that the effort of cleaning up and all that is completely eliminated for them. As a user, you can promote. As the administrator, you can certify. That is a higher level of trust. Someone who understands technology, security, database has created the data set and given it to you to use it. Then in that case, no cleanup for you, directly create the report. So that's what I'm saying. You get the data, keep a copy here, make a data model, make a report, publish it, and then it becomes a data set which can be reused. So now let's look at the common scenarios. Lots of scenarios, so I'm going to go very quickly. Let's start with web because it's very common. Let's go to something which is having tabular data. I just need any web page which has tabular data. So I'm just going to go to some Wikipedia page. This is tall buildings in the world. Now this is a table I wanted. Don't even think about copy pasting it because you know what will happen. So now you copy the URL, go to Power Query. I'm going to show some demos in Excel, some demos in Power BI because practically it doesn't matter. If the data source is common, the method is same. In this case, let's do it in Excel. So now I have this. It analyzes the HTML, finds the tables. If there was a login, it will ask you for the login and remember it for next time as well. And then it's analyzing all the tables in that page. And then these tables, we don't know what names have been given unless you're a developer and you go to the debug mode, but usually you will not know. So if the developer has not given proper names to the table, they will look like table 1, 2, 3, 4. So you'll have to do a little bit of trial and error to find out which table you wanted. Some tables may be different. Some table, HTML itself is a table. So little bit of trial and error. When you find the table, don't load, wait. You look at this and say, is this exactly what I want or do I need any cleanup? So very important decision you have to take by looking at the preview. It has already cleaned it up, by the way. Now there are two options here, load and transform. Load means everything is okay. I don't need to clean it up. So load it as it is. Transform means there is some repair I need to do, which is what we will see. But load has a drop down. This is very important. Never click on load directly because sooner or later it will bite you. Load to, because this is Excel, you get two options. That's why there is load and load to. Load will put it in Excel sheet by default. Load to will give you a choice. So it's saying, do you want to add this to a data model? Yes. Why would I want to add it to a data model? Because the data is very large and it's not fitting on Excel sheet. Or many times it is fitting on Excel sheet, but even you don't have to fill 1 million rows for Excel to become slow. Depending on how less valuable you think your organization thinks you are, you will be given a lower end machine and lower end Excel. So that large data is dependent largely on that combination. So it doesn't have to be 1 million rows. If you have slow Excel files, create a new blank Excel file and import that data into data model directly. Now when I do this and click OK, it's going to import it in both places, which is really boring and stupid because it's going to occupy space twice. It doesn't serve any purpose. So table means sheet, data model means data model. So here I don't want table, so you say only create connection. That is the way to import data directly into data model in Excel. When do you do that? Large data, number one, or you are getting multiple pieces of data and doing VLOOKUP. You want to eliminate VLOOKUP by doing relationships. Anyway, so now when I do this, it will go into the data model. Let me show you how that works. Now it's gone into data model. So my Excel sheet is empty. There is nothing in my Excel sheet, but the data is very much there. It's saying 41 rows loaded. It's even showing me. How do I go to the data model? Power pivot, data model. Of course, the data is there. Now let's say I made a mistake and I had a second thought. No, I wanted it to be in Excel sheet. No problem. Right click, load to, say table, remove data model. Now it will warn you that data model will be deleted, which is okay. And now it got the data here. Now that we have got the data, let's look and see, is it clean? No, actually it's not clean because the word M, FT, comma, that should not come. These are not numbers. So generally, even if it looks good, it's not usually good. Now what do? I click on edit. Now the Power Query editor opens. Earlier when I put the URL, instead of load, if I had said transform, it would still come here. So this is your best friend for cleanup. This dialog looks similar, almost same, whether it is Excel or Power BI. The syntax is same, language is same, menus are same, except for one or two. So what do we do here? So look at the columns. First thing to look at is, do I have all the columns? Do I need all the columns, and do I need all the rows? Because very often in today's world, the only place or only way for you to look at the data very often is after you import it, and then you decide. Here you are seeing it before import really. Even if this was to 5 whatever million rows, this takes a top 1000 rows and shows you. Top n rows actually, it depends on some other parameters, but typically 1000. So even if your data is very large, you can see a sample of it very quickly, decide what cleanup to do, and then do the real import. That itself is a revolution in terms of time saving, because if the data is large, the only way to clean it is to first get unclean data in Excel and then struggle with it. But because it is large, everything is getting slow. That part is now completely transformed. Anyway, so first thing is to check, do you need all columns? If you don't need a column, remove it. If you made a mistake, no problem. There is a list which gets created here. This is like macro getting recorded, applied steps. Everything I do will be added here as a step. So if I made a mistake, just delete that step, it comes back. In fact, if I do anything and I want to see how it looked before, no problem. So I'm removing 3 columns just for demo purpose right now. I can always go and step back. So this is how it was originally. Then this happened, like that. So anything can be removed. This is like undo, or you can, while keeping the steps, go and back and forth to see what is happening step by step. Now, a good way of doing that is to select what you want, and if there are too many columns and few you want, select what you want. In this case, I am selecting all of them. So what was simpler? Remove the unwanted column. But if there were 70 columns and I wanted only 6, what was a better way? Select the ones you want, right click in the selection and say remove other columns. Other way is to click on this area, which is at the grid cross section, that table like thing. And in that you can see choose columns, which gives you a list of all the columns. So at properly without getting struggled and without struggling with control click, you can do it. So multiple ways. So in this case, I'm just going to remove this one. Now the second thing you have to look at is data quality, data types. Data types are shown directly there. ABC means text. Height is also being shown as text. That's bad. So now if the data type is not correct, you have to repair it. How do you repair it? Click on it and choose the correct data type. Sometimes it works. In this case, it's not going to work, because even if I say whole number, there is text there. So this is going to give me an error. So if error comes, don't panic. First look at the error. Don't delete the step. You have to at least understand what the error is. So when you click on an error, it goes and shows you that cell and the actual error text to what did not work. No problem. Delete this. And this error happened because you changed type. So remove this also. So we are back. So how do I manage this? I want to split this column based on that space between number and feet. Split column is like what we do in Excel by delimiter characters. Similar, little more powerful, because in Excel, when you choose the delimiter, what happens is the delimiter has to be. So assume I have got this data, I have cleaned it up and so on and so forth. Now this data is coming from a web page, and the web page is going to change. Tomorrow some new building will come. That time I don't have to do all this jugglery. Right click and refresh. It remembers the URL. Assuming that URL is still alive and the table is still there with the same name, it will do the job. That is the difference. So what did we achieve? First time we did little bit of effort. We got clean data. Second time onwards, it's just a refresh, as long as the data source or location is same. That is revolutionary in terms of time saving. So this is how you get data. Now, of course, you can create whatever you want based on whether it is Excel or Power BI. The capabilities are different. Of course, in Excel also, there is a 3D map. I hope you know that. And you could have created a map based on this, showing the locations and the building. Now in this case, the building, it is showing me the map It is showing me the locations, and of course I want to see the height. So height, yes, there is a column. So if I put the height column, and if that height column is numeric properly, it will actually show me the buildings and how tall they are, and then I can zoom in, zoom out and see what happens. Similar map visuals are available in Power BI as well. So it's up to you what you do with the data. We are not talking about the analytics part today, the cleanup part. So this was one situation. Now let's look at other scenarios. PDF is a very common scenario, so let me show you that. PDFs can contain tables, right? So we have PDF with a table. Various types of variations are possible in this table. What do I mean by that? It could be a simple table like this. It could be a table with merged cells. It could be a long table. When long table also two types, whether there is a header, and yes, if there is a header, if the table is breaking across pages, is the header repeating properly? So in this table, the header is repeating properly. But I have another table, similar structure, but on page 5, if there is a header, it is going across pages, but the header is not repeating. All these scenarios now you can import directly into Excel or Power BI. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to copy the path of that file, go to Power BI and try it out. Okay, get data from web and then give the URL. No, this is not web, sorry, this is PDF. So get data from file. If you don't see it here, go to more and go to file. So file, PDF, this is available in Excel as well. If you don't see it in Excel, that means you don't have the absolute latest version of Excel. This was added, I think, 6 months or 1 year back. But your IT team may not have refreshed your Office that frequently. Ask them to update Office if you have the new version. If you don't have the new version, then you will not get this in Excel, only in Power BI. Anyway, connect, give the file name. Now, this is not a database, but it considers it as a database. What did it do? It considered the web page as a database and showed me a list of tables. The same thing it is doing here. But because this is a document, it is giving me two lists. One is pages and one is tables. So now on page 1, notice there are two tables. So this page I don't want to import. But here what you see, it's showing table 1 and 2, which happen to be on first page. So now it has clearly taken the first table and the second table. All good. The merged cells, it unmerged. That's why our rule is no merge cells, because cleanup will not work. Anyway, the other table, which was on page 3 and 4, that had a header which was repeating. So it is smart enough to understand that there is a table called table 3 which is spanning across 3 pages. So without you having to lift your finger, it has actually combined the table across 3 pages. This is beautiful and efficient. The other table, although it is actually the same table, because it doesn't have a header, notice it's column 1, column 2 here, and the first it is this. So you'll have to do some extra jugglery to combine it. But potentially now I can import this data, load, transform. If no cleanup, no transform required, load. So now from PDF, I directly got the data. This is amazing and useful. Okay, next, another very common thing, CSV files in a folder. So what happens there is I have a folder, and in that folder I have multiple files. Obviously, the structure of the files has to be same for all this to work. Structure means columns and data types have to be same. So I have a folder here. I'm picking it up from here. I don't want to manually open and copy paste data, which is what you would do otherwise, or write a macro or something like that, or use a third party add-in. All of that is not required any longer. Shesham, are there any questions?
Yes, there are a few questions.
Anything to be answered right now, please ask.
Sure. Okay. How to apply formula in Power BI with multiple variable like sum product, average, cost per kg, etc.
Yes. So that's more of a DAX calculation kind of thing. I am going to cover calculations a little later, but those calculations are mainly for the purpose of cleanup only, and some calculations which can be done at the time of cleanup rather than after the data is in the data model. The question he is asking is more about DAX formulas, which we are not going to cover today. Next question.
Does Power Query functionality available in online Excel?
No, but there is a direct Power Query itself available on cloud, which is called Dataflow. So if you go to Power BI, you go to powerbi.com and create a workspace. So I have created a workspace here. You go to workspace, go to your workspace. Workspace is the place where all your data and reports are. From here, you can create a data flow. Now you will see data flow asks you various options. Define new tables is what you want. And here it gives you similar options. File, we have seen these options. Database, seen these options. So similar things. This is Power Query on the web. So now if I say file, this Excel workbook has to be on OneDrive because we are talking online. Similarly, if you say PDF, this file has to be available somewhere online, and so on. But yes, same thing, directly do it on Power Query Online, which is data flow. Next.
In direct or live data connection are not able to merge with other tables, is there any option to overcome this issue?
Now it has been overcome. We have something called composite tables, so you can create multiple independent connection to different data sources using direct query and match them up in a local desktop query with additional calculated columns merging and all that. Earlier it was not possible. Search for the topic composite models in Power BI.
How to build correlation between two Excel files in Power BI?
Yeah, I'll be showing that.
Is it possible to get real-time data from a predefined Sharepoint location?
Yes, that's what here we can go to file, you can go to SharePoint folder and connect. And because this data flow is running on browser itself or cloud, basically, you can set the refresh frequency. In fact, any data can be refreshed. But depending on where the data is, either it will happen automatically or using a gateway. But technically speaking, any data source can be auto refreshed. So once you publish the data source on the cloud, you go to setting and there you can schedule a refresh. Depending on the type of data, you will have different options here. If the data source itself is on cloud, no problem. If the data source is on your local drive, that means on local server or your machine, PC, laptop, then what do you need? You need another download called Data Gateway. You install it on the server locally, on premises server or your machine, PC, laptop, something like that, and then you can make them work with each other, and then you can define the frequency. The frequency can be daily, weekly, monthly. The lowest you can go is hourly in the standard set. In premium capacity, you can have more frequent refresh. But don't overdo refresh, it's an overhead. Just do it bare minimum because this is reporting. This is not live data transactions. So be sensible about the refresh frequency. Okay, next.
Last question for now. Can multiple PDF files be imported which have a common data spanning into different periods?
Yes, technically yes, but finally because each file will be a data source, you will have to get multiple queries and then append the queries together, assuming their columns are same. I will show you how to append. Okay, good. So now I have this folder. I have files. I copy the folder name. This time we will see it in Power BI. So what do I want to do? I want to go to get data from where? Again, here folder. So folder is under files. So go to file, folder. Exactly same method in Excel as well. Open. It will show you something like this. Now, because there are multiple files, other than load and transform, there is a combine option as well. Of course, we want to combine. Now, I have seen the data. I know that the data is clean. That's why I'm saying combine and load. If I had not seen the data, I'm seeing it for the first time. There is some cleanup required. I would have said combine and transform. So let's say combine and transform anyway. But the combine part, who is going to do? Power BI will do, or Power Query rather. Now, because it has never seen the files before, it needs to know which file should it consider as the first file. Why is this important? If all your files have the same data structure, same columns, and all of them have column headings, then it doesn't matter. Sometimes you have some file without column headings. So give a name of a file which has proper column headings so that it can take it as a sample. Generally, first file is taken, that's okay. So you click OK and just relax. It will do the job. And now what has it shown me? It is showing me the data which is combined. And what has it done? It picked up data from 3 files. Of course, we did not want to lose track of which row of data came from which file. So it has added a column called source.name, which is your file name. Now you can clean the data, import it, go and say load, and then work on it. That's how this works. On the left side, it has done a lot of jugglery there. Don't bother, that happens automatically. It created a parameterized query and then repeated the query for every file, but never mind that. So this is how multiple files can be combined very quickly. The other thing is, suppose, okay, let me get this data, close and load. Where is it going? Data model in Excel. So this is where it went. Data model in Power BI. In Excel, it can be in sheet or data model. Now, just to complicate matters a little more, if I add a file, let's say I add April CSV here into that, what happens? I have 4 files now. What do I need to do? I don't need to repeat. I am already in data model. I don't want to transform. I don't want to import. I have defined all this. Just do refresh. And it picked up that as well. So that's how this works. All right, so let's go to the next one. Many times we have data which is in bad format in Excel and we need to repair it. Some of the bad formats are very important to understand, so let's do that. If you have a pivot table with gaps, I showed you how to fill it up with repeat all item labels. But if this data did not come from pivot table, or for whatever reasons you don't have access to that pivot table, how do you fill it up? So now, very important, very often we have data in Excel, and then I'm saying if you want to clean the data, you should use Power Query. Where is Power Query? Data, get data. Now, where is this data? It is an Excel file, yes, but we are already in that Excel file. So in this case, you can say from sheet, but you should ideally never do it, because for demo purpose, I'll show you first and then I'll tell you the reason why you should not do it. So when I say from sheet, of course, you have selected something, it will convert it to a table. Excel tables are absolutely a must because that's the way the range is properly understood. Name ranges don't work with Power Query. Tables work. So now it created Power Query again. And then what is the problem we are facing right now? These empty cells. Empty cells in Excel are shown as null. So we want to fill those null. We are not replacing those nulls, remember, because we don't have a single value for the null. Here the value is Jan, down below it is Feb. So select both the columns, right click and say fill down. So it fills all. How to do it? Not your problem, it does it. If it was in the reverse chronological order, you would have said fill up and then just close and load the data. As simple as that. Now notice what it did. My raw data is still there in the sheet called gaps. Whichever method of importing data you use, whether it is on cloud, whether it is Power BI desktop or Excel, Power Query never changes or touches the raw data. It gives you the output separately. So it added a table which is the output table. Now what is happening here? My raw data is here, it's occupying space. My output data which is clean is also here, they are occupying space twice. That's why I said, although in get and transform data, there is a from sheet option, ideally you should not do it, especially if the data is going to be large. What should you do in that case? Close this file, open a blank file, get data from file, and then pick it up. We have the table here and job is done. So only the clean data is in the final file, not occupying space twice. For demo, I am just showing you this. And just to complete the story, if I add more data here, what is it going to do? Of course, it will understand. So let me just talk 21. And then, of course, I just do right click and it will do the job. Okay, let me delete this table. Another very common problematic file is called a cross tab. There is a horizontal table and there is a vertical table mixed up, typically like an output of a pivot table. But many a times it's not a pivot table. If it was a pivot table, you would have the raw data behind it. You don't need to clean it anyway. You can't create a pivot table unless the data is clean. But this is looking like a pivot table, but it's not a pivot table. Very often many business reports come like this. Now what do? This is bad data. This column is good. These columns are bad. Why? Because every column should have a header, not data. Here, data is sitting in front of header. Ideally, I need 3 columns: product, month, and amount. I can't do that. I can't transpose, because if I transpose, this will go here and desktop will come here. That's not what I want. Actually, I want row by row transpose so that I can create 3 columns. So remember, this looks like a pivot table. So how do you make this into clean data? Again, I am showing you from sheet, but don't do it. Connect to this as a separate Excel. For demo purpose, it's okay. So this is the good column. These are the bad columns. So select the bad columns, right click, and remember I said this looks like pivot. So we want to undo that pivot even though there is no pivot. So you just say unpivot columns and then it does the job. So now we have 3 columns. Now the problem with this is generally the good column will be few and bad columns will be many. So instead of wasting time selecting the bad columns, you select the good column, right click and say unpivot other columns. Output is same, but it is not only more convenient, look at the unpivot other columns formula, right? Unpivot other columns. What is it saying? In this formula, it automatically generates this formula, and it's important, not necessary for you to learn it. Good for troubleshooting, and if you want to do some more sophisticated stuff, then you learn it. But what I'm trying to tell you here is, although we had Jan, Feb, March, April, many columns, in this function, what is it looking at? It is saying only the prod column, keep it as it is, rest of the columns What is the benefit of that? The benefit of this is when you look at our data, tomorrow you may get a column called May, June, July. If you had explicitly selected the columns and said unpivot, it would have hard-coded the names of Jan, Feb, March, April. That is not what you want. So unpivot other columns is always a better option, because other columns get added. The base columns don't change usually. If they change, then you'll have to go and repeat it. Anyway, so now I have got the data. The only thing is it doesn't know what to call them. So just give them names by double clicking. Month and whatever you want to call it. And then the job is done. Now when I say close and load, of course it'll add a new sheet and I get whatever I want. Now what happens if I add May? That's what I was telling you. When I say May, and here we will put something distinct. Now I go here and do what? Go here and right click and refresh, and it does the job. That's how it is. Now if there are multiple tables, then it's a different situation. So if there are multiple sheets in Excel and you want to combine them, that's a different ball game. Now you have to use a completely different story. This I can select one by one and combine, but I'll show you a different way of doing it. I need this file to be picked up in a different manner by creating an empty Excel file and then importing it. So I'm going to close this file. And then what? Then I'm going to open a new blank Excel file and then show you how to get it. Now I go to data, get external data, not from web, get data from file Excel, and here I have to give the file which I was just showing you. So let me give you that file. Now this file has many tables. We have 4 tables there called north, south, east, and I've given them names north, south, east, like that. So I actually want all 4 tables. So I can say select multiple items, and then I can create 4 tables, but I'll tell you what the problem is. If I do that and say transform data, just to show you what happened behind the scenes, what it did is it created 4 different queries, and it'll create 4 tables in your data source. That's not what we want. We want to combine them, no? So when you have multiple sheets, this is not the way to do it. What do you want to do then? You want to do something different. So I don't want this. We go to this part called navigation again. Now what is happening here? Now it's no longer giving me multi-select. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to select one of them. Okay. So now what happens here? I have a query. I have navigation, change type. But if you go to source, notice what happens. The first one. So I delete change type. I delete navigation. I have source here. Now what does this do? This is showing me many things. This is actually showing me what was shown in that table dialog. So it's telling me in this Excel file, there are lots of things. And look at the kind. Some are sheets, some are tables. So we definitely don't want to bother about sheets. So right click on sheet and say do not equal, means remove the rows which are of type sheet. Okay. Now these are remaining, but we have some tables which have nothing to do with our data. So whichever filter condition you want. In this case, there is only one table. So I'm going to say does not equal. Now what is it showing? It's showing me these 4 tables. Okay, so what do I do now? I want to expand those tables. Yes, I can. So this is a very powerful button. I can say expand. So what does it say? Do you want expand? Yes. There are so many columns. Do you want to expand? Yes. And now we actually got this. You got the idea? We got exactly what we wanted. And then there are some unwanted columns also, right? There are unwanted columns. What are the unwanted columns? Item. I want the column table name, so I keep this, but these columns I really don't need. So I remove the columns, and now these are the bad. This is like a pivot table, but these are the bad columns. I want to transpose them. In our case, what is transpose? Unpivot. So I'll say select the good columns, unpivot other columns, and then I got tabular data combining 4 separate sheets. If the individual sheets were clean, then this step was not required. It would have combined the data anyway. So I did unpivot and combination of multiple pieces from the same Excel file. So as you can see, this gets multiple features can be combined to get more sophisticated things. Imagine how you would be doing it without Power Query. It would be really cumbersome. All right. Similarly, Excel files in a folder. Ideally, Excel files in a folder should have data in a table, and the table name should be same. Then you can just combine them like CSV itself. Unpivot we have already seen. Multiple headers is another common requirement, because sometimes what happens, you have headers with merged cells. You can't help it. So what do you do in that case? Multiple headers. So if you have data like this with multiple headers, let me open it for you. Like this. This is bad. We know we should not have double layered headings. We should not have merged cells, but the data came like this. What to do? Don't worry. Select the data. Notice what I have done. I have selected one extra row on top. Very important to do it. Why? I will tell you. Because when we import the data from sheet, this is going to make a table. Now if I had not selected that extra row, it would have taken this row as the header. And then it would have made FY19 as a header and unmerged those cells and all that. So, and here I want this empty row to be considered as a header. So I say yes, forcibly my table as a header. Okay, so it picks up all that and puts it there. Now what is it? Now what do I really want to do? Now what is happening here? This first row which we had kept blank has become columns, which is okay. The actual data is still there. Now I want to transpose this data. I'll tell you why. Why do I want to transpose this data? Because there are null, null and null, null. But this FY19 is actually both FY19. This is both FY20. But I can't do fill horizontally across columns. I can do fill vertically. So what do? I go to transform and there is an option called transpose. Sorry, transpose किधर गया? Transpose. So what happens? Rows become column, column becomes rows. It's like a special transpose. And now that I have this, I can fill them up, isn't it? I can say fill down. So now I got this done. Now I have not given a name here yet, but don't bother. But at least the data is looking better now. Now this region north, south, actually these are the headings, correct? So what do I do now? If I go to home tab, there is use first row as headers. So now what happened? These just escalated here. Now this was empty, doesn't matter. I'll just give it FY. Now what is it looking like? It's looking like the earlier situation where we have 2 good columns and 4 bad columns. Now we can just do an unpivot other columns and then we got clean data. So that's how, even if you have multiple headers, you can manage the show. Okay, alternate rows is very simple. There is a option called delete alternate rows. So some options I'm just going to show you. You can explore them later. So what is happening here? Look at the menus and explore those menus. Click on each drop down, read each name of the menu and think, what is this doing? Then in this situation, I will need it like that. And this exploration will help you come up with the efficient equivalents to whatever you are doing in cleanup. In this 90 minutes, I can't possibly cover everything. So some of the important things to talk about: when you have alternate rows, sometimes you get alternate blank rows. There are options: remove blank rows, remove alternate rows, remove top n rows, bottom n rows, and so many other things. Similarly, we have seen other things like split column, which have various options. Data types. Generally, it understands data types quite well, but if it doesn't, then you have to be careful. You have to look at the data type and think, suppose this was text, for example. It is possible that you just change the data type and it will do the job, right? If there are no errors, this is a good way. For dates, you have to do something special. I'll tell you a little later, but in this case, this is okay. Bottom line is, before you say import, you have to explicitly eyeball each column and see what is the data type there and check, is it correct or not. If the data types are wrong, your analysis will not work as expected. So that is the data type repair. And when it comes to date by locale, then it's a problem. Sometimes you get dates in DDMM, MMDD. So that's a painful thing to have. So let me show you another piece which has dates, and then I'll tell you what happens. So suppose I have dates here, and I'm just going to go to Power Query. In a date column, what happens? If suppose the date column was not properly shown, then what do you do? Suppose this date column was not being, it was being shown as text, for example, because it didn't understand. Now what do? If I change it to date, whether it will work or not depends on your current date format. If the date which is here is in DDMMYY format and your Windows setting is MMDDYY format, all these will give you error. So if that is the case, what do you do? That's what I'm showing you. So when you try to change date formats, try the simple version by changing it to date or date and time, whatever you want. But if it doesn't work, what to do? This is a little confusing. So don't click on date because it didn't work. If it gave error, delete that step, go back. And then this is a difficult to discover item. What is it saying? Using locale. Now, half the people don't know locale kya hota. Locale means country. Using locale do what? So never mind, go there. That dialog has lots of options, so it takes a little while to come up. Now it's asking you what type of format you want. So again say date. And now if it was say MMDDYY, you have to find a country where that format is prevalent. You can't directly say change it to MMDDYY, unfortunately. You have to find a country where the format would be MMDDYY or any other formats in terms of text or whatever. So this is a long list, you figure it out. Once you need to know which country is matching, and then next time you can just use that. Exact country doesn't matter, the pattern is what finally matters. So you choose some country which will have that format, and then let's say United States. Now it has become MMDDYY, and then when you click OK, assuming your input data was in MMDDYY format, it will work. In this case, it will give error. It will only give error where the month is going beyond 13, because my first two digits are days. And this is a very common problem we have when we just double click randomly on a CSV. Half the time we don't even know many of those dates are actually not dates, and the ones which have been interpreted as dates, their date and month has got reversed, so it's a disaster. Anyway, another thing to show here, when you look at the column, there is column quality being shown. So while all this is happening, we can actually not only just repair data types, we can also see data quality. So these panes on top are very important. How do we get those? So by default, it may not be visible. So you go to view, and in view, we have multiple things. Monospace is just non-proportional font, column profile, column quality, column distribution. Ideally, if the data is unfamiliar and doing it for the first time for every piece of data, you should definitely have it open. So for every column, it gives you a histogram kind of thing, showing distinct values and their occurrence. When you have an error, it will show you a bar chart here, stacked bar chart. So the red part shows you errors and the other part shows you non-errors. So three things are actually shown there: valid, error, and empty. In our case, there is no empty. That's why the gray part is not shown. But here in city ID, you will see there are some less than 1%, but gray part is the empty cells. Now, when you click on one of these, it actually shows you the same chart with more details. And there it also shows you statistics where you can see average, standard deviation, and so on. Maybe in some cases looking at unique values max. Sometimes distinct count will matter. So this is a very good place to do a quick data quality check. And if something is a mismatch, you can detect errors and correct them. Now, when you import large data, what happens? If there are large data things which are going to exceed 1 million rows, obviously you have to say load to data model. But then when the data is large, typically it will not be an Excel file because the data won't fit anyway. It will be a CSV or something else. So in that case, what is the practical problem we have? Earlier we had to open that file in Excel and it could not open in Excel, so we were stuck. So now when you import any data, I'm going to take a file which is large, and I'll show you something. When the data is large, how do you even see it to understand what is there and how to clean it up? So the idea is very simple. I'm taking a file which is I'm using a file which is 134 MB CSV file. Probably it will not even open in Excel. So what am I doing? I'm going to go to Power BI and ask it to open the file. What it does is, irrespective of what your data source is and irrespective of how small or large your data is, what does it do? When I say go and pick up a file, I'm just going to discard the changes for now. So let's go and pick up the CSV file, give the path. Irrespective of how large the file is, it will open and show you a preview, right? Preview is typically shown based on the first 1000 rows. And the data type, because in CSV there is no data type information. So the data type is inferred or detected based on the first 200 rows. If you found this to be difficult, then you say entire, but this will take time, or you set the data type, you will manage it instead of that. So the moment you say you will manage, then the column names are gone. If you allow it, then it will pick up the column names like that. Anyway, so bottom line is, important part is, irrespective of how large the input file is, you can actually see the data without using any third-party tool or struggling to import it in Excel or Word or Notepad++ or whatever other mechanisms you use to struggle. Now the other part is, when I say transform, the transformation is also happening on the sample data of first whatever number of rows. So it's very fast. Only when you have decided these are the columns I want, these are the rows I want, these are the data types I want, when you are really clear as to exactly what you want, till then it is just working on the first 1000 rows. So this part is very fast. Only when you say close and apply, that is the time the real import is going to start. That saves you enormous amount of time and effort and struggle. So that's what I mean importing large data. There is no limit to number of rows. As I said, the hardware is the limit. If it's really large data and the database is amenable to be picked up and you have the capacity in Power BI, do it on Dataflow, which is a Power Query on cloud. Because on cloud there is hardware being managed by Microsoft Data Center. So if your machine is slow, try through Dataflows. This I already showed you. One very important thing, many people try to import large data in Power BI. It doesn't stop them, it does import eventually. It will take time depending on how good or bad your machine is and how large the data is, but it will import and then you can do whatever you want. Many people don't realize that the data which we have imported, we are using it for reporting. Now if you have 5 million rows, we are not going to show 5 million rows in the report. We are going to summarize them. So if you are summarizing them, think, can we summarize some of the rows at the time of import itself so that 1 million may reduce dramatically? So remember, the question to ask is, check the business need and say, is there any visual where I really want to show one particular row from the raw data of 5 million? Generally, that is not the case. Then you roll up the data. You can group the data. So if there is a lot of data and it's becoming painful and you realize that you don't need that much level of granularity or detail, what do? You group it. Where? You group it in Power BI, Power Query itself. So you can say group by. For example, I have data here and this has, I think, 200,000 rows. I know you right now, you don't even know how many rows, but never mind. So I have this data. I want to group it by whatever this column is. It's a channel name. So what do? I say group by and choose the name of the column, in this case my column 1. And what do I want? I want to count the number of rows. Okay. So what happens now? There is a grouping happening. And of course you can do more sophisticated grouping and you got this. Now you use this as one query and import it. Use something else as another query and import it. Create relationships. You can do more flexible reporting with much smaller data set rather than struggling to get every row, and then the visual in Power BI is actually doing the aggregation for you. So pre-aggregation at import level itself. That's what I'm talking. Now many a times we create calculated columns in Excel because that's the only place we can create it. We didn't have anything before Excel. Now if calculated columns are hard coded, in the sense they depend only on the data being imported, create them in Power Query. It also has a syntax, not exactly the same functions, but a lot of similar functions. And then that saves you extra formulas in Excel. You can also append multiple tables, and more importantly, equivalent of VLOOKUP. You want to denormalize tables into one, that can be done using merging. For example, I have this file here and I have two tables. I have cities and transaction, right? So in the city table, I have details about city. In the transaction table, I have transactions but only the city ID. So let's say I wanted to create a flat table, not two tables. How would I do that? I go to transform. I'm going to close these to avoid confusion. So now what do I have here? I have two tables. Let me delete this one. So I have city, master and transaction. Let's say I want to combine these two in Power Query itself, create a third table called city transaction, and then only import that table. How do I do that? When you right click, you say enable load. This is load by default. If you say don't enable, then it will be here in Power Query, but it will not be loaded in data model. So now let's say I want to merge these two tables. How do I do that? I go to home and then say merge queries. Merge means one to many. So this is like a transaction. Let me do it from city. It will be easier to understand. So this is a city master. One city appears only once, which is the other table transaction. Okay. Now it shows you various types of joins. If you don't understand joins, just live with it. If you understand joins, you will realize that there are anti-joins also. This is a very good place for comparing two blocks of data. We do it with weird VLOOKUP, some random formulas, which is always inefficient. I have one set of transactions, another set of transactions, or one set of customers who came for this event, another set of customers who came for that event. I want to see which ones are here and not there, which ones are there and not here. That's called anti-join. Anyway, it also supports, so what am I saying? City code here is the same as city ID here. And then you choose. Now sometimes people make Mumbai has double B. It also has a fuzzy matching option, which is really powerful. I won't go into details, but if you have spelling mistakes and matching is not happening, you can ignore case. Suppose someone has written Ahmedabad as two words, it will understand. And you can also give it the tolerance level as to what is this threshold you can give. And that is a number. Depending on the fuzziness, you can give the threshold. So it's really powerful. So this is how you merge the data and it will create a single table now. Now notice what is happening here. Transaction became a single thing. I can expand it and then all the transaction table columns will get added to city column. It will get a denormalized table. I'm not going to troubleshoot that error because that's not the point right now. This is how you merge and this is how you have fuzzy logic for merging. Very, very powerful thing. So with that, I hope you have understood the concept of Power Query. It's available in cloud as well. And data flows which get created on cloud, sources can be still offline or you're on premise using the gateway. Processing happens online. In case of Excel, it's happening on your desktop, Power BI happening on your desktop, data flow processing online. And once it is there, data sets get created, which can be used in Power BI, Dataverse, which means Power Platform, and Azure. It can save it in Power BI itself or in Dataverse or in Azure. What is Power Platform? Power Platform means Power BI itself, Power Automate and Power Apps and Power Virtual Agents. Okay, so finally, once you have created this data set, how do you share it with people? I have already shown it to you. You can go to Power BI portal and mark your data set as a endorsed data set. So people can trust your data set. Admins can do certified. This is the way you should give clean data to people. If you are from IT or data side, this is your job, not creating dashboards for people. Let them do whatever they want. Let users be given clean, authentic, auto-refresh data without them struggling to do it. So you certify it, and then how will people use it? In two ways. If you are using Excel, you go to Excel, get data. In Excel, you go to, Power Query is open. In Excel, you go to, what is open? Just give me a second. How many questions are there, Shisham? Approx? Many or few?
We have about 5 odd questions.
Okay. So I just want to show you this and then we'll take questions. So what I'm talking about is If you have data sets which are published in Power BI, how do you consume them? That's what I'm showing you. First of all, how do you create and publish a data set? I hope that is clear. Creating a data set cannot be done from Excel. You import the data in Power BI. You may or may not want to create. If you just want to publish a data set, clean it, get it into data area, publish it. Then it goes to Power BI portal. Once you go to Power BI portal, you will see all your data sets. You can certify them, share it with people. We are not sharing reports. We are sharing raw, clean data. Now, in Power BI, how do you consume that data? So let's say I have a new Power BI report now, and I want to use one of the data sets which I have already created. That's easy. You go to data, more. In fact, there is a button here itself called Power BI data sets. But here, Power Platform, you can use any of the existing data sets. You can also use data flows, which I talked about earlier. And these are data flows from these are Power Platform data flows, and these are data flows from Power BI itself. There are two types, but basically they are Power Query on cloud. That's how you use it. So if I say data sets now, notice what happens. It is going to go to my Power BI and show me all the data sets which I have access to. It shows them which are certified, which are shared by other users, and those which are neither promoted nor certified, but I have access to them. That's how I use them in Power BI. In Excel, how do I use them? Again, I go to data from where? Power BI. Here is only one option. It is like data sets. So the same list which we saw earlier in Power BI, the same list will be shown to me here. Right? Data set and endorsement. So if I now go to one of those and use it, where is this data? This data is sitting on cloud. I have one sheet, two sheets. Let me delete the second sheet. This sheet is completely empty. When I click on this, what happens? Data doesn't get downloaded. It will directly add a pivot table. And then you do whatever analysis you want. As simple as that. So that's how you consume data. And notice, because it's a Power Pivot based pivot table, the data set contains multiple tables. All of them are there. So I want state to be added. No problem. And I want something else to be added. I will add it in value area. So one more important thing here, because it's coming from Power BI, normally in a regular data, I would have been able to drag drop amount in value area. That is not allowed. It has to be a measure. So if you intend to use it like this, where data sets are published centrally in Power BI and people at user level are expected to use the data, regular numeric columns will not work. You will have to create a measure there called sum of amount, and then it can be added. That is not a limitation. That's a good thing, because then the calculations can also be centrally controlled so that there is no confusion as to ye number kahan se aaya. It has lineage. So that's how the whole system works. The data refresh, if it is online, can happen directly. If it is on offline, it can be. And finally, all this which we are doing in the Power Query context, what is happening behind the scenes? Power Query, whenever you apply a step, is actually creating a syntax for it. And it's a language, M for mashup. So it's called M language. If you want to see what we have applied so many steps, what did it really do? You go to Advanced Editor. This is the program which got generated behind. On the face of it, it is very daunting, but it is not. It always starts with let, ends with in, and gives me a name. So this is the name of the last command. Whatever is the output of this command will be returned. That's all it means. These names can be anything. Now, source is typically the first because you need data. Now the name source is something which you can use as a variable in the second. The name of the second one you can use in the third command. So notice this is city master underscore table, and this has been used as a parameter here. So like that, the previous step's name can be used in the next step as a parameter. That's the concept. And the last step is the output. And then of course As you go along, you look at what you did, look at the syntax, and then you can learn. Sometimes you want to add a custom column with calculations. That also you can do. You can say add custom column. And then the syntax available. So a little bit you'll have to learn. It's quite easy once you get the hang of it. Finally, if you understand flash fill, the flash fill equivalent is also available here called column from examples. So let me show this to you in the CT table here. For example, here, let me get rid of this column for now. I want to create a column which is telling me, suppose I had Mumbai and India, and I want to split the column and I want to give it by example like flash fill. So select the column. You say column from example from selection. And now in that column, what am I seeing? Mumbai, India. So let's say I want to extract only India. So I type an example and then it will figure it out like that. Just to give you another example, let's say column from example from all columns. Now I can take an example from all the columns. Just to show you that I am taking the first digit of ID. Then I am taking 2 characters from the base column and I am taking last 2 characters of the state, RA for Maharashtra. I didn't understand. Let's do that again. I am taking the first, then DE for Delhi and LHI, so HI for Delhi. Now, if you give a couple of examples and you are consistent with it, it is trying to fill it up. So that's what is called column by example. It also gives you suggestions, so you don't have to struggle like this. When you click there, it actually has given you lots of suggestions. So if you have weird kind of dates and times also, this is very useful. Now, if you have premium version, then you can do text analytics, vision analytics, and machine learning models, but that is for another day. So with that, last thing is, if you are worried about sensitivity and you have created information protection sensitivity labels, which we apply to email and documents, those can also be applied to data sets. So what are you going to do? You are going to go back, relook at every piece of cleanup you do and improve it using Power Query. Share it with your colleagues and standardize it so that everyone who is doing that benefits from it. With that, I'll hand over to Shesham for some announcements and questions.
Fine. Before we take up the questions, we are putting in the feedback link in the Q&A panel. Please do click on the link and share your feedback about this session. Okay, we'll start with the questions.
Yeah, 1 minute, Shesham. I am 4 minutes ahead of time. So if any of you have to leave right now, please leave. I am going to handle all questions. It will be a part of the recording. It will be sent to you. If you have time, please stay on. Thank you. And of course, we will announce the 2 winners also at the end of the session. In case you are leaving and you happen to be the winner, we will inform you, assuming your email ID has been mentioned in the question. Yes, question. Yes, Shesham, go ahead.
Yes. We are encountering the below error while using data from OLAP cubes analysis services. The operation was cancelled because of locking conflicts. Is there any resolution for this error?
I will have to check. I have many customers who are using OLAP, but I have not encountered this error frequently. If you can send me a mail, my email ID is there with some screenshots and some little more details, I'll be able to help you. Next.
How to download and use Power BI if we do not have a corporate email ID?
There's no answer to that. Just figure out a way to create a corporate email ID. I'll give you a workaround. You take any license of Microsoft trial for free. For example, you go to office.com, Office for Business, Office for Enterprise. It will give you a trial for 1 month. In that trial, you will get typically I don't remember the number, but I think you get 25 users for 1 month. And there you have to give a domain name, and then it will create 25 email IDs for you. So use one of them. In fact, if you are doing that, might as well take the E5 license of Microsoft, which gives you Power BI Pro, so that you can learn all the Power BI stuff. So create a trial, use that email ID.
Okay. Is it possible to extract data from unstructured data sources?
Unstructured can mean many different things. Typically, those will go into some big data thing like data lake or Azure Hadoop or whatever, HD Insights. So all those you can connect to. Real unstructured data will have to go into some data store which can manage it and then connect to Power BI, not directly.
Okay. We have around 1000 plus Excel files in standard RPA template, each with 300 to 500 plus rows. And what is the best way to analyze? Should we append all or just create a correlation? Considering above scenario, which analytic tool is better, Power BI or PicSense?
So I'm assuming the data in 400 or 500 files is related. You should combine those files data and while keeping the file name as one of the columns and then analyze it together. That makes more sense. I already showed you how to combine multiple files, data from multiple files. I showed CSV. I have a video on how to combine data from multiple Excel files also. Go to my YouTube channel. You will see that then. Next.
Okay. While unpivoting, if you have many columns with months, but want to get all the columns by month only, how can this be cleaned up?
Generally, when you have multiple columns by months, I am assuming what you mean is there are 3 columns with the one Jan. There will be a merge cell above which is year. So I already told you how to handle that. If it is some other scenario which is not what I described, then you need to send me a small sample data which will help me understand the exact pattern. Then I can help you. Next.
Okay, for different vehicle, different variant names are applicable. Example 120 Magna Sport Active and I-10 M2 M4 M6.
Okay.
Wherein Magna is equal to M2, Sport is equal to M4, and so on.
Yeah.
Before merge or append, how to correlate?
Yeah, so this is something where you'll require a mapping table. Import the mapping table first, use the mapping table to decode it, and then use merge. It's called a transformation table. You have variations, and the variations map to fewer variations. That's called subcategory to category. So create that subcategory to category table, import it as one of the query, and then use that table to merge the queries. If you understand database, you will understand what I'm saying. Next.
What is the difference between sharing a data set and using the analyze in Excel functionality of a Power BI model? Can I implement security within a data set? For example, if the data set consists of data from north, south, east, and west, can I ensure that person X whom I have shared the data set can only see the north region?
Yes. So even if you say analyze in Excel, it is still using the same data set and same sensitivity labels and same security. And if the Excel file gets generated, the same sensitivity label will also be applied to that Excel file or PDF file or PPT for that matter. But manage role-based security, yes, absolutely possible, but that is not in Power Query. That will have to be done when you import the data in Power BI desktop. In the data model, you will have to do that. You create roles, create a role. Let's say for a demo purpose, I'll create a role called Mumbai. And then I need to give a query which will filter data for whatever this role is. So now I'll have to go to city master. Now all the tables are here. 3 dots, add filter. What is this? City equal to, and then I'll give Mumbai. Now this spelling has to be correct. Whatever name you give her need not match Mumbai. You could have given XYZ here. Now what have we created? We have created a role called Mumbai. Now if you want to see what is visible to that person, you can say view as, so that you can test it out. So when I say OK, notice everything will get filtered. Now viewing as Mumbai. Apply changes, stop viewing, whatever. And then the data will get filtered on Mumbai. The problem is we still don't know which is the user who is supposed to see it. When will that be done? That will be done when you publish it. Now the data set will be there. In the data set you go and map for roles. So two-step process. Define the roles here, map the roles to people after publishing. That's how role-based security is done. Next question.
Is it possible to import data from a dashboarding tool in which we generally have to feed data every time to pull up a data? And can we map Power BI with that tool?
Dashboarding tool by itself is a tool which generates reports. So if you are saying the output of a dashboard, if you want to import it in Power BI, that is a question like saying, can a dashboard of a BI tool be an input to another BI tool's dashboard? No. But the underlying data you can always connect, because there are 170 types of data. Whatever other tool you are using for that dashboard will be one of those data sources only. So directly connect to the data source.
Okay, is it better to create dashboards in Salesforce or Power BI?
That is a question you will have to answer. You look at what outputs Salesforce is giving out of the box. Of course, there is reporting in any software as a service application, including Salesforce. If the reporting there is enough for you, then you don't need any other tool. But if you are noticing that you are exporting a lot of data from Salesforce to CSV, Excel, and then doing something manually, then you can use Salesforce connector, get that data without that CSV struggle, and create your own reports in Excel or Power BI. Power BI will give you more interactivity, more visuals, more control, and better understanding of data. Pivot table and charts that's all you can do in Excel.
While using get data from the different Excel file, sometimes it shows source column but no data. What could be the reason?
There must be some empty row somewhere. So remember, when you are importing data from Excel, whether you are importing it in Power BI or Excel itself, the raw data must be a table. If you are not using tables, all sorts of problems will come. Make sure it's a table, life will be good. Never import a sheet, always import a table, because sheet has unwanted rows, unwanted columns, hidden things, comments, all kinds of junk can be there in sheet, whereas table is a very clearly delineated thing where the first row is always a header and table knows where the data starts and where it ends. In a sheet, everything is ambiguous.
What are measures in Power BI?
Measures in Power BI are like calculations. We are used to doing calculations in Excel also. We are used to doing for calculated columns and calculated fields in Excel, but measures is a completely different ball game. And it's very difficult for me to actually show it to you right now in few minutes. So let me do it this way. The next event we will do is on how to create measures using DAX in Power BI. Okay, next.
How to export visualization dashboard report directly to PowerPoint?
You publish it. Once you publish it, it goes to Power BI. So two things. One is we have the data and everything dashboard here in Power BI. So let me open one dashboard so it is easier to understand. And I have published it in Power BI. So while it is published in Power BI, what I can do, I will show here. So let's say this is the report I have published. It's visible here, editable here. I can share it directly from here. All that is okay. Now, if I say file, we have various options. If I say export, I have PowerPoint, PDF, and analyze in Excel. So these options of PowerPoint will come here. Now, if it is a report which is in Power BI itself on desktop, what happens? In desktop, I have file. In desktop also I have export, but here only export to PDF is there. PowerPoint is not there. So after publishing, you get both. Great. So that's it from me. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.